In the spring of 1945, the Third Reich is a vision of the apocalypse. Cities are seas of rubble, millions are displaced, and the thousand-year empire is collapsing into a hell of its own making. From the west, American and British bombers own the sky. From the east, the Soviet Red Army is a tide of vengeance, closing in on Berlin. At the center of this inferno, the architects of the regime are not planning new strategies. They are not preparing for a noble last stand. They are, for the most part, thieves. And their crumbling empire is the scene of the greatest heist in history, which is now itself being looted. They're scrambling for the ultimate severance package, a war chest built on the plunder of a continent, on the ashes of its peoples, and on the gold fillings from their teeth. This is the story of Hitler's gold. But Hitler's gold is a misnomer. It was never his personal property. It was something far larger and far more sinister. It was the consolidated wealth of nations, the life savings of millions, and the final, horrific asset stripped from the victims of the Holocaust. And in the final days of the war, a dozen hidden plots, like spiders in a burning web, began to scuttle and move. Plots by SS generals to fund a new Reich, plots by Allied commandos to seize it, plots by desperate war criminals to buy their escape, and quiet, careful plots by neutral bankers to make it all disappear. This is the story of what happens when a treasury built on murder is up for grabs. This is the hidden plot and plots to steal Hitler's gold. To understand the plots to steal the gold, we must first understand the sheer scale of the theft. The Nazi war machine was not just funded by German industry. It was funded by systematic, continent-wide grand larceny. The operation began not with a bang, but with a bank transfer. When the Wehrmacht rolled into Vienna in March 1938 for the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria, they were followed by men in suits. These were the economists of the Reich, led by the formidable Hjalmar Schacht and later the compliant Walther Funk. Within days, the Austrian National Bank's gold reserve, over 78 tons, was seized and transferred to the Reichsbank in Berlin. It was a template they would perfect. When they took Czechoslovakia in 1939, they didn't just seize the gold in Prague. They demanded the 23 tons of Czech gold held for safekeeping in London at the Bank of England. In a shocking act of appeasement and bureaucratic inertia, the Bank of England, with permission from the Neville Chamberlain government, transferred the Czech gold to the Reichsbank's account. The Nazis had stolen another nation's wealth without firing a shot, using the very institutions of their enemies against them. Then came the Blitzkrieg. Poland fell. Its 38 tons of gold were evacuated, but much was captured. Denmark, Norway, Belgium, its 220 tons were shipped to France, only to be hunted down by the SS. The Netherlands, 163 tons. France, Greece, Yugoslavia. This was Raub gold, stolen gold. It was state-level plunder, the monetary reserves of a dozen conquered nations, all flowing into the vaults under the Reichsbank. But this river of wealth had a tributary, one so dark it stains history forever. As the Holocaust accelerated, the SS, under Heinrich Himmler, ran its own ghoulish economic empire. At killing centers like Auschwitz-Birkenau and Treblinka, victims were forced to surrender all possessions, their rings, their watches, their jewelry. And after they were murdered, SS work details extracted the last of their worldly wealth, their dental fillings. Gold teeth, gold bridges, and crowns were pulled from the dead. This was the source of SS gold. In Berlin, this victim gold was delivered to an accountant named Bruno Mellmer. He would take the sacks of teeth and rings to the Degussa Corporation, a private refining company, where it was melted down in crucibles. The gold, now anonymous, was cast into standard Reichsbank ingots. This purified, laundered gold, indistinguishable from the gold of the Belgian National Bank, was then deposited into a special SS account, number 8. The proceeds were used to fund the SS war effort and its apparatus of terror. By 1944, the Reichsbank votes were overflowing. Billions of dollars in gold, art, currency, and securities. It was all mixed together. The wedding ring of a Dutch merchant, the dental crown of a Polish teacher, and the gold bar of the Austrian state were now one and the same. It was the most corrupted, blood-soaked treasury on earth. And as the Reich began to die, its guardians became its predators. The first plots were internal. The Nazi hierarchy was a nest of vipers. And as the ship sank, the vipers turned on each other. They weren't trying to save the Reich. They were trying to save themselves. The chief plotter was Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS. He and his senior officers, like Ernst Kaltenbrunner, chief of the Reich Main Security Office, saw the writing on the wall. They knew the Reichsbank gold was technically state property, but the SS gold, that was theirs. And they had been hiding it. As Allied bombers pulverized Berlin, the decision was made to evacuate the Reich's treasures. The monetary gold, the vast majority of the Reichsbank reserves, was moved to a location deep in the heart of Germany, a place that's safe from bombs and invaders. But the SS and high-ranking party officials began their own operations. Caches of gold, jewels, and forged currency were moved south towards the Alps. This was the seed of the Alpine Redoubt myth, the idea that the SS would make a final fanatical stand in the mountains of Germany and Austria. The truth was less tactical and more criminal. It wasn't a fortress, it was a getaway plan. One of the most famous and enduring plots centers on a dark, cold lake in the Austrian Alps, Lake Toplitz. In the final weeks of the war, SS troops under Kaltenberg's command were seen near the lake. Locals reported seeing them dump heavy, sealed chests into the deep water. What was in those chests? This operation was tied to another, even more bizarre plot, Operation Bernhard. This was an SS-led plan to destabilize the British economy by airdropping mountains of forged 5, 10, 20, and 50-pound notes. The notes created by expert Jewish prisoners at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp were of such high quality that they were nearly undetectable. The plot was a partial success, but by 1945, the SS had a new use for the billions in forged currency, funding their own escape. It is believed that the chests dumped into Lake Toplitz contained the plates, equipment, and vast sums of forged pounds alongside caches of SS gold and lists of assets. For decades, the lake has drawn divers and treasure hunters. Some have died in the attempt. Expeditions have recovered cases of forged pounds, but the rumored gold remains elusive. The lake symbolizes the SS plot to launder their blood money, mix it with forgeries, and use it to disappear. And they did. The hidden plot that has captivated the public imagination for decades is that of the rat lines. These were escape routes, not for armies, but for individuals. High-ranking Nazis, including Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust, Franz Stangl, the commandant of Treblinka, and the infamous Angel of Death, Josef Mengele, all managed to escape Europe. They traveled from Austria through the mountains to Italy. In Rome and Genoa, they found help. This help often came from a surprising source, elements within the Vatican. Bishop Alois Hudal, a vocal Nazi sympathizer, used his position to secure Red Cross ID papers and travel documents for wanted men, laundering their identities. From Italy, they boarded ships to South America, particularly to Argentina, which under Juan Perón was openly sympathetic. But this kind of escape requires money, a lot of money. Bribes for officials, fake passports, passage on ships, and funds to start a new life. Where did this money come from? The evidence is not a single signed ledger. It is a mosaic of inference. The vast, decentralized hoards of SS gold, hidden in lakes, buried in forests, and stashed in small-town bank vaults, were the slush fund. Couriers would move small, high-value packets of diamonds or gold. This wealth, stolen from victims, was the key that unlocked the rat lines. This was the plot, not a grand centralized conspiracy named Odessa, as seen in fiction, but thousands of smaller, desperate, and vicious plots. A general stealing a bag of gold bars, a camp guard burying a sack of victims' rings, an SS officer trading a stolen painting for a visa. It was the final, personal, and successful theft of Hitler's gold by Hitler's own men. But as the Nazis plotted to steal the gold for themselves, the Allies were plotting to find it. This wasn't just about wealth, it was about justice, and it was about control. The gold was the key to rebuilding post-war Europe. Whoever controlled it, controlled the future. The Allies had two primary treasure hunting units. The first and most famous were the Monuments Men. The Monuments Fine Arts and Archives program was a small, specialized group of art historians, museum curators, and architects. Their job was to save the cultural heritage of Europe from the war. They were tracking stolen art masterpieces by Vermeer, Rembrandt, and Michelangelo, all looted by the Nazis. The second and more secretive units were the units of T-Force, or Target Force. These were military intelligence commandos. Their job was not to save art, but to capture enemy assets, scientists, technology, chemical formulas, and of course, economic intelligence. In the spring of 1945, both groups were in a race against the Soviets and against the collapsing Nazi states. On April 4th, 1945, units of the U.S. Third Army, under the command of the fiery General George Patton, captured the small German town of Merkers. The local German civilians, eager to curry favor, told the American military police a strange story. They spoke of a nearby salt mine, Kaiserode, where in the final weeks,
The local German civilians, eager to curry favor, told the American military police a strange story. They spoke of a nearby salt mine, Kaiserode, where, in the final weeks, a parade of SS trucks had arrived, unloading a mysterious cargo. They also mentioned that the main entrance to the mine had been sealed with an explosion. The military governor, a lieutenant colonel, was intrigued. He located one of the mine's assistant directors, who confirmed the story. The U.S. troops found a smaller, secondary entrance. What they found 2,000 feet below the Thuringian countryside would stun the world. They rode a rickety elevator deep into the earth, into a vast cavern of salt. There, they found a steel vault door, 3 feet thick. It was locked. The next day, Army engineers were brought in, and they set a charge. The blast blew the door clear off its hinges. The American officers, holding lamps, stepped inside. They were in a chamber 150 feet long and 75 feet wide, and it was full. In front of them were over 7,000 numbered canvas bags. One of them was slit open. It was filled top to bottom with gold bars. But that was just the start. Lining the walls were stacks of gold bullion, 2.75 billion Reichsmarks, sacks of foreign currency, British pounds, French francs, Norwegian kroner. And then they saw the art. Piled in the back were over 400 tons of stolen masterpieces, paintings from the Berlin Museum, the Ghent altarpiece, and countless others. But it was in an adjoining tunnel that the true horror of the Nazi horde was revealed. The soldiers found hundreds of suitcases, boxes, and trunks. They opened one. It was full of gold and silver fillings. They opened another. Wedding rings, thousands of them piled like pebbles. They opened a third. Diamonds, jewelry, watches, and even children's silverware. This was the Melmer gold, the victim gold. When General Patton arrived to inspect the find, he was incensed. He was a hardened warrior, but this was different. He later wrote that it was the most appalling sight that I have ever seen. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, made a secret visit to the mine on April 12th. He was accompanied by Omar Bradley and Patton. Eisenhower insisted that cameras and reporters be brought in. He wanted the world to see exactly what they were fighting against. He saw the bags of rings and dental fillings, and according to witnesses, his face turned white with fury. He understood immediately. This wasn't treasure, it was evidence. It was the material proof of a genocide, found in the same vault as the state's monetary reserves. The Merkers mine discovery was a triumph. It was the largest single hoard of Nazi wealth ever found. The Allied plot had succeeded. They had found the gold. Or so they thought. The gold from Merkers, along with other caches found at the Reichsbank building in Berlin and hidden in Bavarian castles, was collected. It was a staggering sum, but it didn't add up. Reichsbank officials, now in Allied custody, were interrogated. Their ledgers were seized, and Allied economists began to see a massive discrepancy. The amount of gold the Nazis had stolen was far, far greater than the amount the Allies had recovered. Billions of dollars in 1945 values were simply missing. Some of it had been spent during the war, used to purchase vital war materials: tungsten from Portugal, ball bearings and iron ore from Sweden, and machine tools from Switzerland. The Nazis hadn't just stored the gold, they had laundered it. And their primary laundryman was not a shadowy figure in a trench coat. It was a neutral, sovereign nation. It was Switzerland.
The final and perhaps most successful hidden plot to steal Hitler's gold was not a plot of commandos and spies, but of bankers and lawyers. It was a plot that began during the war and continued for more than 50 years after it ended. Throughout the war, Switzerland maintained a public stance of armed neutrality, but its financial institutions, chiefly the Swiss National Bank, were the primary financial partners of the Third Reich. The Reichsbank, overflowing with looted monetary gold, needed to convert that gold into hard currency, Swiss francs, to buy materials from other neutral countries. The Swiss National Bank was happy to oblige. From 1939 to 1945, the Swiss National Bank bought over $400 million in gold from the Reichsbank, a value of over $7 billion today. The Allies knew this. They repeatedly warned the Swiss that they were accepting stolen property. In 1943, they issued the London Declaration, warning all neutral countries that they would not recognize any transfer of looted gold. The Swiss bankers, including the head of the SNB, maintained that they were acting in good faith. They claimed that they had no way of knowing which gold bars were looted and which were legitimate, pre-war German gold. This was a lie. Allied intelligence had broken the codes. They knew the Belgian gold, stolen in 1940, had been melted down, re-stamped with pre-war dates, and sold directly to the Swiss. The SNB knew it was buying stolen gold. Worse, they were buying the victim gold. The gold refined by Degussa, the gold from the Melmer accounts, was laundered through the same channels. The Swiss bankers, in their quiet, orderly offices in Bern and Zurich, were trading Swiss francs for the melted-down wedding rings of Auschwitz victims. When the war ended, the plot simply changed. In 1946, the Allies, under the Washington Agreement, forced the Swiss to pay a paltry sum, about $58 million in restitution for the stolen gold they had accepted. In exchange, the Allies agreed to drop all further claims against the Swiss National Bank. The case, it seemed, was closed. The gold recovered by the Allies at Merkers and elsewhere was placed under the control of the Tripartite Gold Commission run by the US, Britain, and France. Their job was to return the monetary gold to the central banks from which it was stolen. It was a slow, bureaucratic process that took decades. But what about the victim gold? What about the gold of individuals, the people murdered in the camps? What about the dormant accounts? Throughout the 1930s and 40s, Jewish families across Europe, sensing the coming storm, had tried to protect their assets. They transferred their life savings, their stocks, and their family wealth to the one place they thought was safe, a numbered Swiss bank account. Then, they were murdered. After the war, their heirs, the few who survived, went to the banks in Zurich and Geneva. They were met with a wall of silence. "You need a death certificate," the banker said. "I can't get one. They were killed in Auschwitz." "We cannot help you. We need the death certificate." "You need the account number." "I don't have it. My father memorized it." "We cannot help you. We need the account number." The Swiss banks used their own privacy laws as a weapon, denying the heirs of Holocaust victims access to their own family's money. For 50 years, they held onto these dormant accounts, eventually absorbing them into their own profits. This was the plot. A silent corporate conspiracy to steal the last remaining wealth of the victims of the Holocaust. The secret held until the 1990s. A new generation of researchers, politicians, and lawyers, led by the World Jewish Congress and U.S. Senator Alphonse D'Amato, began to pressure the Swiss government. Class action lawsuits were filed. A security guard at one of the largest Swiss banks, UBS, made a discovery. He found officials shredding archives from the World War II era, documents that proved the bank's dealings with the Nazis and listed dormant Jewish accounts. He smuggled the documents out, becoming a whistleblower. The dam of silence broke. In 1996, the Volcker Commission was formed, led by former U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker. Its investigation was damning. It found that the Swiss banks had deliberately and systematically deceived Holocaust victims and their heirs. They had lost records, stonewalled inquiries, and profited directly from the war. The investigation also proved unequivocally that the Swiss National Bank had knowingly accepted and laundered looted gold, including victim gold. In 1998, the Swiss banks agreed to a $1.25 billion settlement for Holocaust survivors and their families. It was a fraction of what was taken, and it came 50 years too late. Hitler's gold was never a single shining treasure. It was a river of stolen wealth, and it had many tributaries. Some of it was recovered by chance by American GIs in a salt mine. Some of it was spent by escaped SS officers buying new lives in South America. Some of it, we now know, was melted, laundered, and absorbed into the foundations of the post-war European economy. And much of it, the caches hidden in the mountains, the boxes dumped in the lakes, the ledgers buried in the earth, is still missing. The hidden plot to steal Hitler's gold was not one plot, but three. The first was the Nazi plot to steal it from a continent. The second was the SS plot to steal it from the Reich for their own survival. And the third and most enduring was the financial plot to launder it, hide its origins, and keep it from its rightful owners. The search for the gold continues, not because it is a treasure hunt, but because every missing ingot, every lost account, is a story of a life stolen. The gold is not a prize. It is a debt still outstanding.